I liked certain things about Daisy Head Maisie, but the pacing for this is absolutely terrible. This was released in 1995. It is, of course, based on the story by Dr. Seuss. Something I believe I've mentioned before is that I didn't grow up with Dr. Seuss, despite the fact we share a birthday. But I'm trying to watch more Dr. Seuss and read more where I can to, I guess, discover the stories that I missed as a child. It's quite peculiar that I didn't read Dr. Seuss because I loved reading. I still do, of course, but I basically spent my entire childhood reading, and if I wasn't reading, I was watching television. So it's peculiar that a lot of these bypassed me, and Daisy Head Maisie is indeed one that I only heard of very recently, and I've only just discovered it. And I was really excited about this because it sounded quite interesting, and it is an interesting concept. But as I said, the pacing is absolutely terrible, and I don't know how it compares to the book. If you watch this version, I would love to know if the pacing is the same as the book. I'd imagine it's the same because it's presumably word for word as it's told in rhyme. I assume it's at least very similar, if not identical. And the rhymes are really pleasant to listen to, but the narrative, we could have lost about 10 minutes of this 20 ish, 25 minute short. It's about a girl called Mayzie, believe it or not, and a flower sprouts on her head. And she's obviously confused by this, and eventually, very, very far into this, something happens quite interesting. Up until that point, not much happens. We're meeting various different characters, so it's like they made an effort to keep things engaging with all of these different perspectives, but honestly, nothing happens. The first 2 minutes are really good, and then for about 10 minutes, it is so mundane. Thankfully, the animation is quite beautiful to look at, but the narrative is just dull. Nothing happens. And then something does happen towards the end, so I'll discuss that with a spoiler warning just in case you don't want to know exactly what happens at the moment. But the point there is that a good half of this we could have removed or at least quickened up and not lost anything. I'd be very keen to know what those scenes are like in the book and if they are as slow as this or if they're maybe more engaging. I don't know, but personally, I was just watching it thinking, how is this popular? Why is this, why has it got a decent rating? It's got a decent rating on IMDb. At the moment, it's got 6.3 out of 10. That's across 230 reviews and ratings, which is not a bad overall score. I wonder how many of those are reviews from people like me watching it for the first time as an adult, or if they're people reviewing it with nostalgia in mind, because I'm well aware that when I watch something that's nostalgic, I tend to rate it more highly than I would if I was watching it with a fresh perspective. Either way, it's not great for about half of it. And then there's something happens, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Some positives, though. The animation is beautiful, visually really gorgeous, great color palette. The design of the characters are brilliant, and the rhyming is well, it's Dr. Seuss. It's what you can expect from Dr. Seuss. I don't think I mentioned, but it's directed by Tony Collingwood, and the only writer credited on IMDb is Dr. Seuss, which makes me think that it is pretty much word for word the same as the book. We also have a great voice cast, including Tim Curry, and we have Henry Gibson as the Cat in the Hat, who does appear a few times. We also have Francesca Marie Smith as Mayzie McGrew, and the voice acting is absolutely fine. Another positive for the film. So visually it's great, voice acting is great, the concept is interesting, the rhymes are really pleasant to listen to, and there's some silly humor here and there that works well. I think the biggest issue is simply the pacing, and we could have lost a good third of this without actually losing any substance. I would be curious to check out the book. Or if you know how it compares, please feel free to just tell me, because I'll probably never get around to actually getting my hands on a copy. As a story, it's a fun concept. We have an interesting message that I'll discuss in a moment that I perhaps hadn't expected, but it takes so long to get there that I was just starting to not understand why this was popular. So I guess I'll discuss now, with a spoiler warning, what happens in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes. I'm not sure exactly, but certainly it's towards the end of it when things start to get a little bit more interesting. So spoilers from now. Mayzie ends up signing this contract make her famous because she's the girl with a flower in her head. And she becomes famous, and we get this whistle stop tour of what her new life with fame is like. But then the Cat in the Hat comes along, and she begins to realize that fame is not worth it. And it's about focusing on what's really important. And that's obviously her family and her loved ones, not fame and fortune. And it's sweet. It's a sweet message, but we could have got there much more quickly, or we could have had a lot more time enjoying Mayzie experiencing this life of fame, because we got to see hardly any of it. So because we didn't get to see her being overworked and being pushed to her limits in the eyes of fame, we didn't get a really powerful message at the end. It's a good message, but it could have been significantly more impactful if they allowed us the time to realise that Mayzie was being overworked and life of fame is not what it's cracked up to be. But they just didn't do that. Again, I don't know if the pacing or the emphasis in the book is more evenly weighted, or if it is just a whole lot of nothing and then everything at once. I'm not sure. Feel free to let me know if you know. But to sum up, Daisy Head Mayzie is a nice idea. The film is not great. It's worth checking out if you're a fan of Dr. Seuss, but it definitely needed a bit of work, as the editing is slow. Scenes needed to be cut down, especially scenes where there's no dialogue, because just things aren't moving forward and there's not a lot going on, and if there's nothing to listen to either, it's not very engaging. Could be significantly better. I can't comment on the book. It is a good story, but definitely had room for improvement.